I knew how to ask questions. I knew how to be humble, but I also knew how to have a trade win because I had been a trade for many years, and I knew what it felt like when a builder wasn't on my side, and I knew what it felt like when a builder was on my side. And when a builder was on my side, I bent over backwards for that person to try to do what I could to help the relationship be successful. So I think the number one thing you can do is make sure they know that you want them to win.
Hey everybody, Chris G here, Hardhead CEO, and today we're going to talk about culture and how the culture of your business can make you become that CEO. And to help me do that, I got Andrew Poles here, all the way from Austin, Texas. Andrew's been a long time executive coach, and better yet, he was in construction, which he knows our language and our business. So please help me welcome Andrew. Andrew,
Great.
welcome. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's great to be here. It's great to be in this conversation with you and hopefully other contractors looking to grow their businesses.
Give us a little background before we get started, and we'll go into the culture thing.
Yeah, so I'm an executive coach. I've been coaching professionally for almost 23 years now. I've had the opportunity to work with a little over 10,000 people in lots and lots of different businesses and areas of life. My focus really is on those visionary founders who have the vision of their company is out in front. And almost all of my clients also have a very strong commitment to growing their family. And I don't just mean having more children. I mean having a really strong relationship with their partner, with their kids, while they're undergoing the really challenging task of growing their business. And I love helping people through that stage of their personal and professional growth and their business growth. I've gotten to work with executives at big companies that are outside of construction, from NASA and Dell to, mom and pop remodelers in Baltimore, Maryland. So you name it, I've kind of been there and had some experience with that.
I saw something about Netflix. I thought that was neat because I like watching Netflix.
Yeah. Who doesn't? And Netflix is great.
I mentioned earlier, we were talking about culture and how that it gets into the becoming a good business and building that team. But before we go there, I want to know we talk about mindset a lot. We change, get to have mindset, and you've worked over, you said 10,000 people, but what's the biggest mindset that we have to switch on the successful entrepreneurs before we go into the culture question?
I think when it comes to especially this area of business where you have construction companies and people who are wearing hard hats for a reason, generally speaking, the people who wind up owning businesses in that field do that because they're really good at the technical aspects of the job. So, for example, most owners of construction companies are really good project managers. They know how to do the technical part. Maybe they can handle most of the trades with their own two hands. Many of them they can plumb, they can frame, et cetera, et cetera. So because they're really successful being individual contributors in lots of roles, they wind up having enough success to transition into being a business owner. The challenge of that, to answer your mindset question, is that the kinds of mindsets and the kind of skills you build to be a really effective solo contributor are completely different from the mindsets and skills you need to build to be a successful business owner. Unless what you want to do is work 24/7 and do everything yourself, in which case you don't need to worry about what I'm talking about. But if you don't want to get trapped by your business, you have to flip your mindset from how do I make things happen in the world to how do I empower other people to make things happen in the world as well as I can or better. And that is a completely different mindset and set of skills you need to build to be successful with that. So that would be the top of my list.
Well, if you want to work 24/7, you're listening to the wrong podcast because that is not us. I'll tell you what. So that kind of leads into the culture thing where you got to build a team, right? And you don't have to work at 24/7.
Yeah.
How important is culture in your mind in any business for matter, but contractors in general?
I think if you were going to have, your top 3 contributing factors to success, top 3 or 4, it would be in that high. It would be in that group of top 3 or 4 most important things up there, along with having a financial business model that actually works, having a team around you that can actually do the work to your level of expectation and given what you promise your customers, et cetera. So it's way up there. And the reason why I say that is there's this famous quote from a a consultant named Peter Drucker, who was really, really well known in consulting circles. And his quote is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So he said that because if you think about what is culture as distinct from something like a strategy or a plan, your strategy is how are you going to accomplish your goals? What are the ways you're going to go about it? But the culture is when you're undertaking those activities, where are you going to come from in doing it? So when you're making those sales calls, or when you're writing that ad copy, or when you are writing the estimate, or when you are talking to your trades about whatever, who are you going to be as you're doing that? How are you going to be with people when you're doing that? Are you going to be focused on excellence? Are you going to be focused on speed? Are you going to be focused on fairness? So the construction company I worked with, for example, here in Austin, one of the key aspects of our culture was fair but firm. So our culture was about being fair to everybody, being fair to the homeowner, being fair to the trades, and being fair to our company. And what we found is that there's just a lot of contractors, and I'm sure anyone who's been in this business long enough has run into these people, these kinds of contractors who they only want to be fair to themselves. So they will beat up, so to speak, a trade, or they will leverage their trade to try to get the trade to do things that weren't in their scope because the homeowner's upset and the builder doesn't want to pay the price tag. So they try to take it out of the trade's profit. So they're trying to be fair to themselves, but they're not being fair to the trade. So part of our culture was be fair but firm. Now, why is that important? Well, because your culture informs people how to do something without having to create a 50-page manual for how do you handle every single possible circumstance that could come up. It teaches people how to think and where to think from. So your culture does a lot of work for you in building the kind of business that you want, the kind of reputation that you want to have. And it's something that if you don't do it thoughtfully, if you don't think about how you want to do it, what you will wind up with, which is what most companies are like, is a culture that is just a reflection of the founder's personality. And in some cases that works well, and in other cases it really doesn't work well at all. So it's definitely something worth paying attention to.
Well, what's the best way to, I guess, implement culture or convey it? Maybe that's a better word.
Well, okay, because they're really different, and I think you probably would have to think about what you want your culture to be and why before you think about, well, okay, now that I know what that is, how do I convey this? So I'm going to answer the second question. And if you want to circle back to the first one, we can do that too. But in terms of how you convey it, assuming you know what it is, the culture you want to build, and you can actually define it. You could say define it through certain values. I think one of the best ways to define a culture is through values. Values can be a word or two or a short phrase that really capture an essential element of, again, how are we going to approach the work we do? In the case of our company, fair but firm was one of those values.
And that could be part of the personality. I mean, you're the business owner. You're setting the values, your own personal values, really, that you want to reflect in the business.
Yeah. So excellence can be a value. Mm-hmm. Affordability could be a value. You could have a culture that's really based around affordability. How do we make this as affordable as possible? Or as a contrast to that, you could have a culture that's really about elegance. How do we make this as elegant as possible? You're not going to have both high degree of elegance and a really high level of affordability. So your culture is going to exclude some things and include other things. So the first thing you have to do in order to communicate your culture is you have to define it in words, in a, preferably in a document that people get when they join your organization, that they can refer back to. Why is that important? Well, because if your values and your culture are not the way someone already thinks and already acts and behaves, they're going to have to undergo an intentional process where they're applying effort to try to start behaving and acting in the way that is consistent with your culture. And to do that, it takes repetition. So being able to give them something to refer back to is an important part of how you can do that well. And when you do something like that, you want that to be very concise. So we're talking about 3 to no more than 7 key values that definitely fit on one piece of paper, and preferably less than a whole piece of paper. And then, so that's one aspect. Another aspect of it is you actually want to talk about it on a very regular basis. So let's say let's say you're the owner of a company and you're meeting with your project managers and your whole team, your internal team, and you're going to talk about a particular job. You can always either point to something that happened that is consistent with the culture, or you can point to something that's inconsistent with the culture. And both things work to reinforce and continue to educate people in exemplifying the culture. So there's always opportunities to do this. So again, like most people think, you just have to sort of like tell people once and make sure they understand it and then just expect them to do it. That's not the way people work. Like this doesn't work that way. So it takes a lot of repetition. And I do think those one-on-one meetings or team meetings are a great time to do that, where either you say it or you ask someone to point out, hey, tell me something that happened that was consistent with our value of excellence, or tell me something that happened that wasn't consistent with it. Both things will get people thinking the way you want them to. And the next time they go to that job, what you will find is they're going to start seeing examples of either excellence or things that aren't excellent without you having to say anything for a little while. So if you keep repeating it and keep having them do it, they will start to take it on themselves without needing such constant reminder. You can do the same thing with your trades. You can do the same thing with your clients. And you can bring it up in meetings. So
subconsciously, they're going to expect you to ask that question. You do it enough. And they'll be looking for it. So that way they'll have an answer for it.
That's right. That's right. So, you have to be willing to define it. You have to be willing to repeat it. And you have to be willing to point it out when it's there and point it out when it's not. And then the last thing is you have to be able to tell people why it's important. So some people will just take it on because you said so, but some people need to understand the underlying purpose, the why. Mm-hmm. So in addition to defining what excellence is, you have to be able to talk about, why do we care? Why is it important to us? What does it have to do with the bigger picture? And if you do those three things, you define the values, you define why they matter, and then you repeat them in meetings and conversations where you're pointing out examples of where things are consistent or inconsistent. That'll do about 95% of the work of creating the kind of culture that you want.
I love the fact of values, and I'm glad you brought it up. But once you define those values, I think it's important if you look for this good job description. I've put out this, here's our values of our company. If this is not you, then this is not the place for you to work. I think that's a good thing. Now, some of my listeners might say, well, Andrew, there's hundreds of values. And the best part about what we have today is the internet and ChatGPT and all that AI. So what I recommend, and I've done this before, and it used to be I had to go to a book, but now I can say, well, what's the value? And I had to do this exercise years ago with my coach, like yourself. And he said, list your values. All right. So I went through a list, and you can come up with all kinds of values, more than your seven. Yeah. More than your seven for sure. And the best way, at least for me, was to identify, look at two at a time.
Okay.
And which one's more important to me? And you can feel it in yourself. Which one resonates with me? So you eliminate that one, go to add another. And you finally get down to which one's more important to you. And you will bring it down to 7 to 3, whatever the numbers are. And that is really you. And I think it's easier to be you than make your company something that's not. You can't lead, you can't, and I'm only talking about leadership, I'm sure with you, but you just can't do it if you don't want to fake business if that's not represent yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I like the way you put that. If you're the owner, you want it to be an expression of you. And then for you, it'll be more accessible to be that way. Then you also have to think about, if you grow your business and you grow your teams, that may not be as natural for others. And so you have to have some patience for the fact that you're asking them to now act in a way that isn't natural for them, so that they can represent your business appropriately. I really like your exercise of if you have 15 things written down and you just can't manage 15 values, of asking yourself, which one's more important? I think that's really powerful. I like that. I'm stealing that from you. The other thing I found that is useful is sometimes you write down 2 or 3 things that are really all kind of facets of the same diamond. They're all trying. They all duplicate each other. Yeah. And you can ask yourself, is there one thing that captures all 3 of these that would say it more powerfully? That's another great way to try to keep your list concise.
And there's no right or wrong answer. Those three things that might mean the same. One person might pick one word that encompasses for them, where you might pick another. And
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah.
We're all different, and we're going to run our business differently. And
Yeah.
I just got done with a solo about being differentiated from each other. In different businesses, we might do all the same thing, but we're different.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to distinguish what we're different about so we can get more sales. Find effective.
So I have a question for you about that. Can I flip
Yeah.
the script on you and interview you for a second?
Sure.
So personally, I find that one of the key upsides of business ownership, of entrepreneurship, and as you and I both know, there's a lot of downsides and there's a lot of upsides. So you got to really capitalize on those upsides, right? So I found
Absolutely.
one of the upsides of business ownership is that you get this opportunity to build something in the world that you can be proud of and that you enjoy engaging with, and that you have the authority, you have as the business owner to be able to say, this is what our company stands for. This is the way we're going to work. And so, as you were saying, there's something really I find fulfilling for myself and my clients about being able to put a piece of themselves in the world as a business, not just as a physical structure that you can look at and say, okay, I built that and I'm proud of it. But the business actually is like an extension of what matters to you that exists in the world independently of you. What's your experience with that phenomenon, Chris, of sort of like the joy or the pride or the enjoyment of building something that you feel like is an extension of yourself?
It feels good. And I don't mean that. What I mean by that is, you know that you've helped somebody. And people come to you with not necessarily a problem. They have a project that they also can't do themselves. And in my world, we're building that project for them. And I think I love looking at floor plans and then helping people walk through it. And there's some people, and sometimes women are more than men. And I don't mean like the can't envision thing. I have that ability to see things. And what I really enjoy is, I talk to them in my mind. I have a vision, and I hope it's their vision. And then I love looking at it and walking through a place after I looked at it on paper, and I walk through. It's like, yeah, that's how I imagine.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
That is putting your influence out there.
Yes.
And when the homeowners come and then they see it, it's like, oh. And if you point out, say, remember what we talked about right here? Yeah, that is great. I spoke last week to somebody about, I'll be quick, about a patio and a covered patio, very nice, going to be a very nice home. And I mentioned they had a fireplace, and I explained to them about why they might not want a fireplace. I give them an option of a bigger uncovered patio with a big old fire pit. And I can see their faces light up, and they like the idea. It's like, I can't wait to build that. And then they say, look at this fire pit talked about. It's like, oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
And those are fun, I think.
Yeah.
Will there be some headaches in building it?
For sure. Yeah.
But it's the fun part. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
And just telling people that story, other people.
I'll tell you, to ride on your coattails there, I really like that story. I find that many of the people I wind up coaching have that same enjoyment and fulfillment that you have of having a vision for what someone's home could be like, helping them refine their vision and then bring it into reality and then getting to see them enjoy the finished product. And that I find that many of those same people who love that process, they don't understand or they don't know or they don't appreciate that they can apply the same exact sort of process to building their business that they do to building a home. That they can think about their business like what they want it to be like when it's finished.
Yeah.
And then they can get in the process of building the business to match that vision, and that it has, in some ways, an even more meaningful result for you, because you build this building and you're kind of handing it over to the homeowners who are paying you to do this, and you can really appreciate how much they enjoy it. You can even drive by it when the project's over and smile and everything. And I've done that a million times with houses.
Oh, heck yeah.
The good thing the homeowners don't know, or they think I was a creep, right? That I drive past their houses sometimes and look at them. But with the business, you get to, like, so to speak, live in it day in and day out, and kind of just sit there and look at people acting on your behalf. your salespeople or your project manager, your estimators, whatever, who are acting with customers the way you would want them to, or they're building houses the way you would want them to. And then you're like, wow, I built this business. And I find most business owners in our industry don't take the opportunity to be as thoughtful about building their business as they are about building someone else's home. Do you find that, or is that just my experience?
Oh, no. I don't want to go into a rabbit hole, but it's the same. You're absolutely right. And I'll be quick with this story. I built a horse stable for a lady. She's a veterinarian. She's been planning this horse stable for years. Matter of fact, one of her stories was she goes, "No, Chris, this is what I dreamed for. I went to school to be a vet. Now I have the funds. I want to build my dream." Okay. And she had drawings for a horse stable. And we went through it. This is a nice person. And I talked to her one day about something she hadn't thought about some lighting. And she was, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "Listen, you told me all this story. You built this beautiful," she wanted to match her house. It matches her house almost to a T. I said, "You're talking about $200 or $300 worth of lighting that you want to show off your horse barn at night. Can you imagine people driving down your road be able to see your horse barn in the light, the way it's going to exit?" She thought about it. She goes, "You're right. Let's do it." Said, yeah. This is your dream.
Yeah.
Why are we going to hide it? And for $300, what's the big deal? Because you're spending a whole lot more on more things. So, but it's our dream, and you bring it to reality. It's a lot of fun.
And see, so that's a part of the culture of Chris Gilman's business, right? Is hey, I can hear it in the way you speak. Hey, I want this person to love the outcome, and I want them to be proud of it. I want them to show it off and get joy from other people's appreciation of it. So you're building these beautiful structures. You're building these meaningful moments. That's a part of your culture, right? And so that is just very different from someone whose focus is, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, like, how can I get people the most that I can for the least amount of money? I'm going to be just solely focused on saving money, which for some people, that's a great fit. But maybe they're not going to be concerned about, how do I feel when I'm in the space? How do I feel when someone else looks at the space? So I think that's a great example of culture at work, that story that you just shared, because it's an expression of the culture that you value and what you're trying to help your clients accomplish.
How do you get, buy-in from your people?
From people I coach?
No, I'm sorry. From teammates. We're building this culture. We're building this team.
Okay.
How do we get those people to help buy into us? Obviously, we talked about make sure they understand the values before they go on.
I think it's a bigger challenge with trades than it is with employees, because when you hire employees, right, you can interview for the people who are already leaning the direction you want. You can let them know it's part of the job and make sure that they're up for that. So I think you have a lot more influence, let's just say, or readily available influence when you're hiring. When you're working with trades, my favorite expression for my clients is, look, there are no perfect trades, only trade-offs. There are only trade-offs, not perfect trades. And so you're constantly making trade-offs, I think, with trades. So when it comes to trades, I think unless you do a decent amount of volume where trades can really see the value in building an ongoing relationship with you, because, it's really hard being a trade. There's just no two ways around it. It's really easy to lose money as a trade. It's easy to break even as a trade. It is hard to make money as a trade. So their job is hard. So if you don't offer them a significant opportunity, I'm not going to lie to you, it's hard, because they're just trying to make money. So I think one of the best ways you can get buy-in from trades is to genuinely be on their side and make sure that they get that you are on their side. So I learned this early on in my career. When I shared with you before we started recording, Chris, that when I started off in construction, I had been a trade, but I'd never built homes. So when I built my first home, I could not find my ass with both hands. I literally told the person who hired me that I didn't know how to do this. And he said, "It's all right, I'm going to teach you." Then on the first job, he just threw me in the deep end. So I'm talking to the framer, "You're going to love this." And I'm like, "So what's the difference between a rafter and a joist?" Like, I'm asking questions like this with the people I'm supposed to be managing, right? So I was just very transparent about it. But what I did know how to do, even though I didn't know how to frame, I didn't know how to plumb a house, I didn't know a lot of the technical stuff, I knew how to ask questions. I knew how to be humble, but I also knew how to have a trade win because I had been a trade for many years, and I knew what it felt like when a builder wasn't on my side, and I knew what it felt like when a builder was on my side. And when a builder was on my side, I bent over backwards for that person to try to do what I could to help the relationship be successful. So I think the number one thing you can do is make sure they know that you want them to win, and you're going to try to help them win. What does that look like? Well, it differs trade by trade, but just to give a couple of examples so this isn't too conceptual, it might just be like, hey, I'm going to call you out a week before I want you to start. And we're going to walk the house together. I want you to think of all the questions you need to ask. I want you to think about all the materials you need to have on site. I want you to get me everything you need before you even start. I'm going to give you 1 week heads up to do this so that when you start, you can go gangbusters and move through this thing efficiently and make money on this. They appreciate that because most builders call them and say, hey, can you be here tomorrow? Yeah. And then they show up tomorrow and they walk the house. They have no idea what to expect. So there are things you can do to let them know I'm on your side. And by the way, when your trades win and have a great job, so do you. It always happens that way. So if you do that kind of work to let them know, I'm going to have you win, but I'm going to be fair and firm. Like if you tell me you're going to do something for a price and I communicate that price to the homeowner and you screwed something up, you're going to have to eat that just like I would. Yeah. So I'm going to be fair to you, but I'm going to be firm. They respect that. And then when you talk to them about how you want them to be in your homes, they're way more likely to do that for you if they know that you're trying to help them win. And you tell them, here's how you help me win. Here's how you help me win the next project, which by the way, I'm also going to give to you if this goes well. I need you to be like this with the homeowners, space. I need you to interact with them like this. I need you to work in these hour windows and not, like that. So when you connect the dots for them, once they know you're on their side and they get, hey, if I do this the way the person wants me to, and they get 3 referrals out of this and I get all those jobs, well, that's worth it to me. I just got myself 3 jobs by just taking my shoes off or wearing the booties or not wearing my tool belt after the paint is already, finished and banging up all the cabinets. It's like, so they're more willing to do that, right? And you know what I'm talking about with that.
I know what you're talking about. Doors get dinged, and it's like, whatever. I do know what you're talking about. As a culture, or as a CEO, what we're all striving for, well, not all, but most of us are wanting to become a CEO. Part of that culture is delegating to other team members.
Yep.
Any helpful hints there on how to do that, be more effective in delegating?
I think the best way to think about how to do this successfully is to understand how it's done unsuccessfully first, and which is the way most people do it at first, which is you delegate things because you start to get overwhelmed and you need to get things off your plate. And so it's sort of like, here, take this. And so generally what people do is they dump things rather than delegate things. And there's a difference between dumping and delegating. Dumping is when you say to someone, you're going to start doing this now, and here's how you do it. Good luck. Delegating is when, likewise, you're going to give someone else the accountability, but you're going to thoughtfully consider, okay, right now, today, does this person have the skills, the experience, the know-how to be able to take this over independently, or do they need some period of time for me to sort of hold their hand, mentor or coach them, and kind of get them to the point of from where they are to where they would need to be independent. And most of the time, people can get there relatively quickly on most things, but it's not instantaneous. And so you need to understand, to delegate effectively, what is the learning process like for the other person and what kind of support do they need? And that support both means like knowledge or skills. It means mindset training sometimes, which I'll talk about in a second, is different from skills. And then the third part of it is like a cadence. How often do they need me involved? Is once a week enough, or do I need to check in every couple of days? You have to think about these very granular things to successfully hand something off when it's complex enough that you can't just give it to them once and have them take and run with it. So you have to understand the complexities of the person, the task, and the learning curve. Is that a good first stab at that?
As in the culture and delegation,
yeah,
and being a good leader, storytelling is Very important. Matter of fact, I used to have a podcast called Titan's Tale. It was all about stories. And we changed over to this because I found out a lot of my listeners are contractors. And I'm a contractor, so it kind of makes sense. But telling stories as an example, you believe that, I believe it, and telling stories and using those as examples, that can actually convey culture as well, right?
I think you bring up a really powerful point that I wasn't even thinking about, but you're 100% right. I mean, even beyond our industry, the power of stories to convey culture is as old as human beings had speech. You know, we have been using storytelling to convey culture since the beginning of language. So I think that's a really important point. And you know, in certain industries and in certain relationships, being a really, really good storyteller is very important. So if you're trying to raise money and you're talk to investors, you need to be a really captivating storyteller. But if you're trying to convey culture, to a trade, you don't have to be the world's best storyteller. I mean, I told that stupid little story about talking to the framer and asking him the difference between, a rafter and a joist. And I think what that story does is, first of all, it shows that I really was completely ignorant, but also that part of the culture that I was building was a certain level of honesty or, authenticity. And it took 15 seconds to tell that story. It's not like I had to paint the picture of, so we're standing there and there's a stick framing kind of nailed together with braces everywhere. And I've got the broom in my hand. Like, you don't need all that stuff. It's just like, I had to ask this question. It's a simple little story. So I don't think people should feel intimidated by this thing called storytelling. Everyone is a natural storyteller as a human being. You should just share examples, and stories will help convey the culture way faster.
And it's more relatable to some people. They're going to put it themselves in that perspective. It's like, that makes sense. And then I see it sometimes.
Yeah.
And most of the time it'll stick with them too, more so than just a plain old lesson without a story. So
yeah, it's like the verbal equivalent of a picture speaks 1,000 words. And it does a lot of work.
Before we wrap up, I'll ask you one last question. I think it's important. Not necessarily burnout, but I guess you could call it burnout. When a business owner hits the wall, overwhelmed and so forth, a piece of advice would you give them, to keep going, to get a breakthrough or whatever it is that they need to pick me up?
Well, let me talk about, in answering your question, the couple biggest factors I see that lead to burnout, because the solution is different for each one. So, one of the things I find that leads to burnout is that business owners don't have a sufficiently comprehensive system for how they manage all of their promises and all the tasks they need to do. And so they wind up doing that management piece by trying to use their memory for certain things. Oh, God, I remember to call so-and-so back. Let me write that on a sticky note, put the sticky note on their monitor. And then, they tell someone, oh, hey, help me remember tonight when I get home, I need to do this thing. So their system for managing all of the things they want to do and their promises is basically made out of sticky gum out of chewing gum and sticky notes. It's not even duct tape. I mean, duct tape is highly effective, right? You put duct tape on something, it sticks, but their system isn't even that strong. And so what winds up happening is that you drop balls, then you feel disappointed, and then you work harder and then you work longer hours and you're not being very efficient, and it sucks up all your time. Then you're not being with your family, you're taking care of your sleep, and it just cascades. So when that's the challenge, people actually need to learn a system that is 100% comprehensive, in the sense it doesn't rely on their memory for anything, so that they don't have to worry about what did I promise and when am I doing it and how's it getting done. And that knocks out a lot of the burnout. Okay, so that's one cause of burnout. But there can be multiple. So, sometimes people get burned out because they're bored. They've been doing something for a while, and in the beginning it was exciting, and they just kept doing it, and their business grew, whatever, and now it's sort of like used up. It's like used up. It's like in a marriage. My wife and I have been together for 25 years. So for me, that's half my lifetime, and it takes something different 25 years into this relationship to have the closeness that we share not turn into something that's so familiar that it's not fun, right? It takes thinking and work. So sometimes why people get burned out is that they actually need to grow. they need to grow in some way. They need to let something go, or they need to think about growing the business in a new direction, or they need to do something that stimulates them. So there can be multiple causes. And I think it's important to know what those are.
Kind of like stretching yourself,
Yeah.
improving make yourself uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable and do it.
100%. Like, I feel like you constantly need to be doing that if you want your life to be interesting and a wild ride, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Andrew, the best way to get a hold of you, I assume it's maybe through LinkedIn or maybe
I do lots and lots of communication on LinkedIn. So that's LinkedIn/in/Andrew Poles. Or on my website, there's a contact me link. People are welcome to contact me there. For the people listening to your show, there's a free executive strategy session. You can book with me. We have a 1-hour call. We look at your biggest challenges and opportunities and kind of what a roadmap would be for you to move your business forward. So that's also available on my website. People are welcome to contact me any of those ways.
Awesome. We'll make sure those links are in the show notes below. Also, if you would like to meet with me on how to save time, become that CEO, just talk about the business in general, there's a link as well in the bottom of the show notes for Hard Hat CEO. Andrew, thank you for your time today. I forgot to tell everybody, Andrew's all the way from Austin, Texas. And
that's right, y'all.
That's right. I love it. I like Texas. I like Austin. Been there. That was my sales territory many, many years ago.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
Thank you guys. And we'll see you again next week on another episode of Hard Hat CEO. Bye-bye for now.